Hi, thank you for talking with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Could you introduce yourself and tell us why you're here at the Baltimore Comic Con?
Of course, it's my pleasure. It's what I'm here to do. My name is Onrie Kompan. I'm the writer, creator, and producer of the Yi Sun-shin trilogy. The series is about a Korean admiral that battled the Japanese in the 1500s. He was outnumbered 10-1 against the Japanese, and he beat them 23 times in a row without losing.
Wow.
It's all based on a true story, too.
Now, history is something that a lot of people think of as textbooks or dusty museums that are boring. But you said this is based on a true story. How accurate is it?
I'm so glad you asked this question. Now, because people have that mentality that this is history, and they think that when they pick up this book, it's going to be like a history lesson that's beat over their head. This is so not the case with our book. Now, our battles are 100% accurate, but our goal is to entertain our audience. So we have a story in place. And the actual truth is that, what actually happened is not far off from what we've done here. So it all kind of works out together in a really great way. We have everything that happened is grounded in reality in our book, but we did take some liberties to make the story more interesting because people want to be entertained.
And what kind of liberties? Was it just like dialogue and story, or was there anything added that was not realistic?
Primarily with the dialogue, we wanted to take more of a modern tone with our book because I think people can get lost really easily when you have like thick text of how people talked back then. Because the truth is that we didn't exist 400 years ago. We don't know how people talked back then.
Right.
We can assume that they spoke more eloquently than we do today, or we can just enjoy ourselves a little bit more when we're reading comics, right?
Right. Well, that's it's nice to see a comic like this because you see historical fiction and novels being actually okay, I guess you could say. Those are bought and people read them a lot, but you don't see it as often in comics.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that the biggest challenge that the comic book industry has faced ever since its inception is the fact that it is grounded in superheroes and kid stuff. And although the kid audience is really important because it kind of builds the foundation of future readers, we also have to keep in mind that there are people that eventually grow up and they shouldn't have to quit reading comics. It's like you don't stop watching movies because you reach a certain age. You don't stop reading books once you reach a certain age. Why should you stop reading comics? That's what we're here for. We're to keep people who are already over the superheroes, over the kid stuff, to keep coming back and reading comics.
Are you working on any other historical comics?
Absolutely. I'm actually working on a book right now about my grandfather's life. He was a Russian-Jewish soldier during World War II, and he actually shot down Nazi airplanes. So I'm putting together a graphic novel about his life. He passed away a couple years ago, and this is sort of like my tribute to him.
So that's actually really incredible because a lot of people look at history as big events. World War II, Civil War, giant, large events that don't have faces put on it. But if you can tell history through people, through individual stories, at least that draws me in more. I know that I feel like I can identify more when I see a personal story as opposed to the overall big picture.
Well, absolutely, because the people that existed in history are people that you have more in common with than, say, superheroes that don't actually exist. These are the stories I aim to tell are about extraordinary people that have actually existed in history and in many ways inspired the heroes that we read about in comics.
And that's another thing about history that I think people don't realize is that there were action heroes. There were people who did these incredible things that nobody knows about.
Sure. Yeah, and that's what we're here to change. So I primarily focus on projects that speak to me, that I feel I can bring to a wider audience. Primarily with Yi Sun-shin, what I was looking for was an edge and find a story about a real-life superhero, and he truly was. I mean, he was outnumbered 10-1 against the Japanese, and he beat them 23 times in a row without losing. And this actually happened. It's not something I made up. This actually happened.
That's a true underdog story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at what Leonidas and Themistocles dealt with during the Second Persian invasion during, in Greece, and they achieved very similar feats, but nothing like Yi Sun-shin.
And that's like something that to me is interesting about this is there's a historical fiction aspect of telling of a story, but like 300 was a very overblown telling of an event.
Well, in some ways, I agree with you. I mean, I enjoyed I personally enjoyed the movies very much. I didn't really care for some of the over-exaggerated stuff like the monsters and stuff like that. But you have to keep in mind too that they wanted. Everybody's kind of dabbling. This is all just an experiment at this point, and so they have to take some liberties to bring people in and entertain them.
Oh, it's incredibly entertaining. I know personally that I've talked to people who they read it and thought it was true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, like the graphic novel stays a little bit more true to what kind of happened. I don't think that they took as many liberties with the monsters and stuff like that. But
Right.
Again, it's just sort of the thing that's beautiful about history is none of us were there to actually see any of this stuff happen. So it's really just kind of like a legend. It's like, you're telling things, and you have the freedom to kind of exaggerate certain things, and who knows? The way people tell stories, who knows how they would exaggerate it? You see what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Sure.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of the con.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.